All right, we're recording again, Tanya. Look pretty. All right.
Recording again.
I have, we're going to just have like a dialogue here, Tanya and me and all of you. But I have a series here of case studies, and then we're going to do a situation which you can work on in groups. But we're going to just use this as a conversation.
Do I have a copy of that?
Yeah, it's on your.
Oh.
I'm going to talk about, these are situations, and I think, Tanya, we talked about over the years.
Okay, and also, would you please make 3270 111, 3270 113?
Yeah, I don't know the supervision regulations.
But we want to
I
make,
read this up and I put the wrong, no. She said, Tanya, do you know what you did? I said, I don't even know the right regulation for supervision.
yeah, anything related to supervision is going to be under 113.
Yeah, I know, I got it everywhere else but there.
So we just want to make sure, because I don't want you to be misdirected here. And leave and say that your director doesn't even know the regulations.
No, I don't know the right, it's me, because I'm no longer functioning as a, okay. So we are going to have sort of like a conversation with you. You guys talk about it and think about it too. The first situation is director determines the staff are not properly supervising children when they are playing outdoors, meaning the staff are on their cell phones or huddled in a corner talking. I remember when I was working in Harrisburg, we used to walk between buildings and there was a child care facility at one of the state office buildings. And with a playground right up front where everybody could see the laboring industry. And every time I'd walk by, I'd be counting the kids and counting the staff, and I'd see always, probably always, two staff in the corner talking. Now you'd think they'd know with people walking around here, but they didn't. So, what steps should the director take to make sure they understand the appropriate supervision regulation? They're always on it, they're on their cell phones or in the corner talking. You catch it when you're observing.
And I remember many times pulling up, into a facility, and as soon as they see me, it was like, they'd all be
Like they saw a spider.
uh-huh, and immediately they'd be like, all dispersed where they should be. So I always found that very interesting, but, and I don't know if you've encountered that as in your role as a director, those of you that are, but if you just like walk out or do a little spot check and oftentimes see them huddled up.
We have fences, so they like to hold up the fences. Fences have posts, and that's what I do. I go out there and, my fences don't need to be held up. They need to go walk around with the kids, so I ask them to disperse. Or we have walkie-talkies. I'll get on walkie-talkie. You need to walk away from the fence. Yeah, it's like a magnet. They just they get dispersed and then they come back again.
So those of you who were staff before you became directors, why do people do that?
Something to do, chit-chat. They're tired. They want to.
Deb?
I think that because there's not activities planned at that moment, there should be, but so they don't feel like they have to be doing something or engaging with the children at that moment.
Anybody else? Everybody hear what Beth said? Is that true? You find that true?
I think that's true. I think also depending on the type of play space that you have available, like we already have procedures in place because of the way our playground is set up, that there has to be someone stationed at either end of the equipment so that they can see all of the children at all times. And that's just, they know like from day one that that's what they have to do. They're trained to do that. So we don't really, it hasn't happened where they've been like huddled up together talking just because they know that they can't be, because then they can't see the children, and part of supervising the children is being able to see them, especially in areas that present higher risk for safety. So that's part of our policies and procedures for that, specifically just for the playground though.
Okay, but let's get back to the situation where it says the cell phones. What does that have to do with anything? And director's role?
They seem to be allowed to have cell phones,
Who's allowed?
The staff are using cell phones, so
In this situation?
in this situation.
Yeah.
So there's no policy that's, curbing anyone's allowed to have their phone or technology or device, they're going to be on it as much as possible. But if you have a policy that prohibits that, then you've already are one step in the right direction, because they're not gonna have that temptation to be on the phone.
Tiffany?
I was just gonna say, if it is part of their policy that they're not allowed to, obviously they would be written up, which would, hopefully enforce.
So how
it.
many here have cell phone policies?
Well, here's the problem that just came up with our cell phones. We have a policy, they not allowed to have their cell phones in the, well, they have them in the school, but
On
they should be
their
turned
person.
off, and they're not allowed to be on their person. We just had an emergency management team from the area come in and do an emergency management training with them, and they just undid all of our cell phone policies, because they want them to have their cell phones on them in case there's an emergency, so they have the cell phone to be able to call 911 or to call for help.
Yeah,
That's a dilemma, isn't it, Lisa?
Yeah,
Yes, it's a
we-
huge dilemma, and then the staff looks at me and saying, yay, we can have our cell phone, I'm like, no, that's not
So what do you do
okay."
to counter that?
So we countered that with, the center has a cell phone that is available to all staff, in a central location. So if there's an emergency, we have a ramp area that, like, literally almost every room can access. And the school agers have have a walkie-talkie that gives them access to, an issue where they can get help. If for some reason their landline doesn't work, because, there are landline phones available in the classrooms, that's a STAR standards. But we had the same thing with emergency management, I did the training with the staff, so I was there listening, and that was one of the things that we hashed out within the class while the director was there, was that, they need a portable device for things like a field trip or, somewhere where they can walk. And we just went with a portable devices, an extra phone that's on my account. That's never used, has yet to be used.
So,
I wouldn't want anyone going for a walk or a trip without a cell phone. Well, that's a different thing.
That's a different thing, when we go on trips, I do allow my staff to
Yeah,
use cell phones.
but the issue really is, it's not the cell phone, it's the
It's the
misuse of the
use.
cell
Yeah,
phone.
Misuse.
correct.
Okay, so what are you doing about the misuse of the cell phone?
Confiscating it.
Pardon?
We've confiscated cell phones.
Anybody else? I mean, we're getting back to this, and this is the whole promise of today, it's the director's role. I mean, whether or not you're a director or, right now, this is not the issue. What are you doing as a staff that this is insubordinate? And why with a cell phone? Because people are addicted to them, right? I mean, they are addicted to the text and staying in touch, and can't wait for that break or whatever it's gonna take to do that. So is there anything aside from confiscating them that you can do? Because confiscating them only does what? Sometimes. Hmm? Yeah, gets them
Or
angry.
makes them sneakier.
Sneakier or whatever, but I'm just
Well,
trying
there has to be
Well,
consequences.
I can tell you a story about them being sneakier, because I had a girl that I had hired and I called her on her phone, like, in the same week she was hired, like, more than once. So I said, when she came in the next day, I said, it's no phone. I said, I'm putting it in the locked drawer, because obviously you have, an issue, and if you need to check for a ride or you need to do whatever. So she comes in the next day and she gives me the phone, no problem whatsoever. One of the staff members comes out and is like, she's got her phone like under her leg, because all their legs glow, she's like, she's got her phone under her leg, and that time I said, I have her phone. She gave me like a dummy phone. Well, she was done. I mean, that was like, 3 strikes in like 2 days or whatever, like she was totally done, and it was a shame, nice girl and everything, but she really couldn't stay off the phone.
So, but what you're facing is an addiction.
Yes.
You're facing an addiction, and whether they be addicted to booze or drugs, these kids of today are addicted to their phones. So, aside from confiscating it, did anybody willingly understand? I mean, if you go over the rationale for supervision and the liability that puts you folks in when they're not supervising properly, does that have any impact?
Well, if they're looking at their phones, they're obviously not looking at the children, and especially on the playground where the most, highest rate of incidents happen. So, absolutely, it puts us at a high, you know.
Right, so does it get through, do they still thumb their nose at you and still do
I was
that?
gonna say, I think,
I
I
mean-
don't have that at my center, but the other center I own, but I'm not at every day. That's a huge issue there, and, I mean, I've gone in and done trainings on supervision. We're to the point of, you know, confiscating the phones, because just nothing you tell them or talk to them or demonstrate to them is getting through that cell phones, because they do this at home with their own kids and nothing ever happens, or,
Right.
you know, we're on our phones when we're driving our cars, you know, and we've yet to wreck because of that. It's just this mentality of it's not gonna happen to us.
Mhm.
We can do more than one thing at one time. And
That's the reality, isn't it?
So when you go over, like, one of the things I used to say, so tell me, first of all, do you know the definition of supervision? Yep, here, see, direct, and assess. So tell me how you meet those requirements when you're, got your face in your cell phone all the time. How are you doing that? How are you meeting the requirements of the regulation? Well, I don't know, so I don't know, I mean, I hear what you're saying, that you tried to do some training as well, but again, I bring it back to, okay, what you might do at home with your own child, that's one thing. When you walk in this door,
right.
this is a regulated business in Pennsylvania, you are required to abide by regulations, you're responsible to ensure health and safety of these children. How are you doing that? In meeting the requirements of one of the key important things you need to do all day is supervise children. How are you doing that if you're on your phone and distracted?
Does it involve, do you have any that quote get it, that understand and put their phones down?
See, that's the problem, I think at that center, my partner runs that center, is that not a single staff gets it in relation to the cell phone. And that's why I don't have that issue at the center I'm at every day, because, my staff do get it, and they're very vigilant on, you know, telling new staff that, no, this is not allowed, you cannot have, you know, you can't possibly do your job if you're worried about a cell phone.
So Chastity, are you telling me you're a tougher director?
I
I mean, let's be honest, this is what it's about. It's how well you enforce and instruct and teach your staff, because if you give up or say, you know, it's the way it is.
that's one thing that we struggle with.
Yeah, I'm not disparaging
Yeah.
your partner, or I don't even know who she is, but the point of the matter is that this is the clear thing about this whole session and course of
You
this
have
whole.
to be willing
You have to take the tough stance.
You do, and not be, you know, although I think even though I would be the tough one, I mean, the other center sees me and it's the same thing. They're, you know, like fish in the sea, and I'm the shark coming in. It's, you know, they scatter. My staff don't do that because we're with each other every day, all the time, so there's mutual respect. But we're not friends either, because, you know, you can't be your staff's friend and be their director. You have to draw too many hard lines,
Right.
I think.
So the moral of this story is?
Be willing to follow through your policies, or you're gonna end up with huge headaches.
And citations and violations, yeah, and following what Tanya said about asking each staff person how do you assess and direct and see and hear when you're on your phone.
Vicki,
Yeah.
could I just say, you know, as leaders, we're expecting the lead teachers to direct the children and tell them what they expect, you know, through the classroom rules. And so as directors, we need to be the lead teacher and tell the staff what we expect and what we need them to meet.
Yeah.
So how can we be an example to them for their classroom if we don't tell them and mentor or monitor, not monitor, what's the word I'm looking for? Model, thank you,
Yeah.
those qualities.
Right, absolutely. So, I was listening to, there was a webinar on, Early Childhood Exchange, one of those groups that does webinars. Have any of you linked into those? There was one on the other day about the essential qualities of a leadership and a child care director. And, this gentleman was talking about, social justice, and I'm thinking, how the heck does social justice have anything to do with being a leader in a childcare facility? But he wove the whole thing in, similar to what you said, Kim, that you have a moral responsibility. You've got children that have to be properly supervised, health and safety, and it is your responsibility as a citizen to make sure that you're doing everything you can. You're operating a business to make sure that the staff supervise, that you take a tough stance, you model, you direct, and if you're not a dynamic, and then he made this thing, if you're not a dynamic teacher in the classroom, where you learn to model for the children, you're never gonna be a good director. It's like, whoa. I mean, so it's some interesting things that he said, because those qualities of watching and making sure that you owe it to the children, and you owe it to the staff that's the justice that they deserve, is proper supervision. Emily?
I was wondering if maybe we need to really just stress the worst case scenario. Like, tell the staff, like, look, you know, what is the worst thing that can happen? If you are on your cell phones all the time and some child gets hurt while we're on this playground, what is gonna happen? Not only are we gonna get cited, but you're gonna see a child get hurt. And I would think that heart-wise, no one wants to see a child get hurt. And shame on us if it happens on our watch. Because
Go ahead.
it's devastating.
Paula?
We have had staff meetings where we've had this issue, and we have cameras in every classroom outside. We're at the Y, so the entire building has cameras everywhere. And the video is right in the lobby, so everyone can see what's going on in every classroom outside throughout the whole building, and there were issues with staff on cell phones. Then we had a staff meeting, and my director gave us actual examples of what had happened if the child was not looked after correctly, or like if something were to happen, if the person was on their phone, and she just made it real life for us and said, is this where we want to end up? And I think it brought a lot of people to realize, like,
That some
okay,
real
like, this is
situation.
not
So
right.
so one option is like you and Emily said, some real life examples. This is what can happen if you take your child. You've had some of those correct or complaints you've had to investigate.
Right, and the worst case scenario is, you know, a child gets hurt or, you know, fatally injured. The facility loses the license, everybody there loses their employment, their livelihood, because the department takes the sanction against the facility. Because you have not complied with your requirements to keep children healthy and safe. And last year, there were about 200 sanctions that we revoked certificates or refused to renew for bad things that have happened. And it is real life situation, and that's where I sit now. I see it throughout the state, and bad things happen to children in childcare.
One of the things too, while we're on this topic, it reminds me of something that's come up time. If there is a child hurt, injured, or even fatally injured in a situation, or a child abuse situation in a disciplinary action gone wrong, sometimes the directors will say, well, I fired the staff. Am I okay now? No, we'll tell them, why not? Why do you think that?
Because the policies and procedures were obviously not in place that the staff knew and were not monitored to make sure.
So whose fault is it?
The directors.
So we've seen plans of correction where they said, well, I fired the staff, and we come back and say, not good enough.
That's not good enough.
No,
Right.
it's not good enough just to fire the staff person. So that makes your role dicier in terms of, you've gotta have like you said, policies and procedures in place that you monitor the staff to make sure that doesn't happen. Do you have any comments on any other situations like that?
I find it interesting too, when you ask staff, even a couple scenarios here, but there was a facility operating, they did have policies and procedures in place. You ask the staff, well, what happened? Didn't follow them. I just didn't do what I was supposed to do. Well, why not? No, I just didn't do it. also, again though, and going back to the director saying, well, you have these policies and procedures in place. Did you ever revisit these with your staff? Did you ever talk about them? Did you ever go in the classroom unannounced and just observe to see at transition times, you know, are they doing what they're supposed to be doing and counting and whatever, you know, you have in place in your facility? And they, you know, are you following up on that again as you should be doing as the director? And you'd be like, well, no, not really, we just gave it to them. They signed off, you know, they
Yeah,
signed off,
they
and
read
so
it, yeah.
we figured everything was fine and they were doing it. But again, it's like, but you, and we have actually, required that in some of our settlement agreements that, okay, you know, we might issue you a provisional and allow you another opportunity to operate, but you're gonna show us how you, the director, are gonna be accountable in following up with what you're telling, okay, these are your procedures you put into place, how are you gonna show us that you're accountable? And that you're following through to monitor that your staff are being accountable and following up as well.
That's it in a nutshell, really. I mean, the plan of correction we put in with somebody that violated it is sort of the theme we're putting in the class. What's your plan to make sure that the staff is accountable, and you're accountable for the staff following the policies, procedures? And now this week, we're looking at regulations. So as you work on that situation this afternoon, think about that. What would you do? Like you said, observations, they spot checks, they have some training. I think, I was remembering a situation a couple of years ago. We had there was a very prestigious facility near the Harrisburg area, which was a Star 4, I believe. And we got a complaint that they left one of the staff left a child on the playground. I think he was at 18 months and they were out there for like 5 minutes or something. So we had a meeting and they brought in all the chief honchos, you know, not just the center director, but some of the corporate people there. And they were kind of mortified that their staff, I think, violated the regulations. You left a child on the playground for 5 minutes. The staff was having a bad day. He said, we learned the person was having a bad day. So what do you think we should have done? What do you think we did in that situation? We were together, weren't we, that day? Weren't we?
I think so.
I think we were, yes.
My mind's not as sharp either.
I know, I remember that, because but the staff had a bad day. So I said, because that's when I think it was acting director. So I said, and, like Chastity, and so, the staff had a bad day. And they were going, well, you know, so what it turned out to be is, they agreed to up their observations and some training, and to try to get, this was interesting, they came up with 2 solutions I remember from that meeting. They were going to do some more training of other staff, so that if you notice a staff person, quote, having a bad day, we want you to alert us, you know, she's out of it today, or she's had a bad night, or she's out of it. You alert the director, you alert someone else, like, you know, have the other staff not just say, hey, you know, she's not doing well today, but make it known so that you, as a prevention, they were gonna do that. And then, I found this interesting, they were going to tighten up their hiring processes, because they realized that when they were hiring staff, there were some of the, they didn't give them enough situations, like what would you do if, remember those questions we asked about, and they were just going through some motions. So they had a couple of ideas. We ended up, I don't think, doing a sanction on them, but they came back immediately with a plan, and it was, one of it was to offer, to make other staff aware that you need to be in touch with how your other staff mates are reacting. If there's a bad day, one of them's having a bad day, alert somebody, because she could be, and that's exactly what happened. And there was another one, I think, up in near Williamsport, same kind of thing happened. It was a good facility and the staff just wasn't paying attention.
Right. They, the one, I'm not sure if it was the same one, but I know, well, we counted when we went out to the playground, we counted when we lined children up to come in, but when we got into the classroom, neither one of us counted. And so we left someone behind.
So,
So oftentimes too, as part of the plan, we will require that all staff get training and supervision, and then you get into, well, why do I have to do that? I didn't leave a child in the playground, why am I here? Why are you
Yeah.
punishing me? So so I would ask directors, well, how do you deal with that? What do you say to your staff?
what do you say to yourself? What would you say?
It's good to have
I
a
always-
reminder.
Hmm?
It's good to be retrained and have a reminder.
Yeah, it's
Bring
good to be
everybody.
retrained, like a lot of, yeah, you're right, people get, upset because they have to take the supervision training and if they didn't do it.
Yeah.
Anybody else? It's good to have a
Do it
reminder.
today.
I always tell my staff we're a team and, you know, we're supposed to be there for one another and even as far as like supervising playgrounds and things like that, you know, we're all supposed to be aware of what's happening within the center and if someone wasn't aware that that happened, then, you know, maybe we all need to be refreshed and reminded that you need to be aware and we're part of a team. We're in it together. It's not one person's, you know, problem. It's really everyone's.
Joyce, I see you nodding your head.
Refresher, I don't think it hurts for everyone to be reminded.
Okay.
I think it can happen to you, but.
Yeah, but
I know, but.
Yeah, the key takeaway here is, you, as a directors, you're always gotta be thinking of how can you keep staff, alert to what's happening to other staff, how to keep them trained, how to revise the policies and procedures, or follow up and make sure they're working on. Okay, you have a second situation there. The director's working on a plan to make sure staff have their paperwork, quote, up to date for the staff files. What are the steps the director should take? Keeping their paperwork up to date in staff files, which includes the,
Health assessment,
Health assessment.
clearances, training.
yep, talk about that. Especially, and we'll talk provisional help, we'll also talk about the child abuse stuff that's out now. Tina.
So we have, you know, different everybody could use different programs, but there are like tracking programs that you could put in, and I can't even think of the name of it, when we had the one class she was telling us about, like Cozy or something like that, that would send reminders. So as you're coming upon like your 2-year, you know, health assessment, or you're coming up on, you know, what's now gonna be the tracking of the 3 years of, you know, the clearances, you know, when you have a large center, I mean, I have like 30-some people at my center, so trying to track all of this is difficult. So what we have things set, so you get the reminder 2 months in advance, and then, you know, 6 weeks in advance, and then a month in advance, so the girls are then given multiple reminders, either through, you know, paper mail, you know, like handed a paper, they're sent emails, they're left notifications through our like tadpoles program, you know, and then it, like red alerts would come up when they're really close.
Who's in charge of that?
That would be me.
Okay, anybody else? So director sending out reminders. I just heard you say
3 years.
3 years, okay, how many know, let's put everybody on the spot, what's the new requirement as of July 1st for child abuse clearances?
I thought it was 5 years.
I thought
Five?
it was five.
I thought it was
I thought it was-
December, but I thought it was 3.
training, I thought was 5. Clearances, I thought was.
Okay,
No,
let's
it
hear,
just
let's hear.
changed again.
It just changed again.
Yes, it changed again, 3, listserv, okay, come out on listserv, 5, do I hear another 3, do I hear another 5? An auctioneer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they changed it like volunteers versus regular.
As of, how about we,
And
just
indirect
quickly,
things, direct.
because this is, as a director, right now is a very good reason what you just responded. I'm not putting anybody in the spot of why you need to be on listserv and need to know this stuff. It changed July 1st to 5 years.
Right,
Here's the,
right.
here's the email you sent.
Oh,
Well, this
good.
way I'll never fall behind, I'm doing it every 3, that's just it.
Preventative.
It'll take me that long to get full.
Yeah, clearances are now valid for 5 years, okay? If, as of July 1, so you're gonna need to go all of your staff files and look at the dates of the clearances. If the clearances were obtained prior to December 31st of 2014, and they're more than 60 months old, you have until the end of this calendar year, December 31st, to have these clearances updated. Child Abuse, Pennsylvania State Police, and the FBI, all three are gonna have to be updated. If the clearances were obtained prior to December 31st, 2014, and are less than 60 months old, you need new clearances by 60 months from the date of the oldest clearance. So, for example, if you have 3 clearances, you have child abuse that's dated January 1st, 2014, Pennsylvania State Police that's dated February 1st of 14, FBI that might have been dated March 1st, 2014. You're looking at the oldest date, so you're going back to that January 1st, 2014 date, and all 3 of them would need to be updated by January 1st, 2019, 5 years from the oldest date. The mandated reporter training, you're right, someone said 5 years, that is a 5-year requirement, that a new employee has to have that within 90 days, and every 5 years thereafter, and your staff who were currently employed as of December 31st of 2014, they should have had their mandated reporter training at this point. And you all know how to obtain that for your staff on the Keeps the Kids Safe website. There's a list of approved training. I see a lot of head shaking. Good. So it's online, and you can print off a certificate, and you should have that on file for when the certification rep comes out and does your inspection, or an unannounced monitoring and follows up on your clearances. So it did recently change again. If someone comes to you with clearances in hand, you do need to take a look at them and the dates. If they have been obtained within the last 5 years, you can accept them, but they also have to sign like an affirmation statement indicating that nothing has changed in those last 5 years. And we're using the disclosure statement for that purpose. They're signing the disclosure statement saying, I haven't been convicted of any crimes or been an indicated or founded child abuser in the last 5 years. And they sign that, and you have everything on file. If you make a copy of the original clearance, that's okay, but you need to also note that you saw the original clearance on such and such a date, and then initial that if you can. Give the,
I was told you couldn't do that.
Yeah, you can.
Go ahead, Tina.
Sorry, I just have another question. So, like, the new thing is, because I do a lot of volunteer work also, and now volunteers get all of their clearances for free, and I printed out, like, I've updated mine recently, and what is the difference? Like, I mean, if my girls, because we're looking at like $40-some in clearances. I know the cost went down a little bit, but still we're looking at close to, what is the difference, and why are they free and not free for childcare workers when, they don't even make any money? So, we're like volunteers.
They did reduce the rate to $8, which is the cost of processing a clearance for an employee. And my understanding is that I believe sometime this month or next month, and when you go in, and there will actually be a box to check if you're a volunteer versus an employee.
There is a box.
Okay, good, but you cannot accept it. This was a law enacted by our general, assembly. I can't speak to the specifics other than if you're employed, you can accept one that's indicated it's a volunteer. If
But I don't think their certificate comes back any different.
it will.
Yeah.
It does not currently come back any different. So, but it will, they have to do a system change, and it will say volunteer on it. So right now, you're basically just taking their word that they did apply for the one for employment purposes, but eventually when they get that system change in place, it will say volunteer, and you can't accept that one for the
So
purposes of
everybody should just do them
employment.
today, is what you're saying, before they change it to say volunteer. Not that we heard that here, but no.
No, you didn't hear that here.
Okay, but Tanya's gone over a lot of information about disclosure statements and all that. So what does that mean for your role as a director? And all these changes and all these laws. What does that mean for you as a director in terms of making sure that it's in place when the inspector comes out?
Because I have to tell you that this is cited time and time and time again, clearances. It is cited all the time. And I really think in the scheme of things, it's not a hard concept to understand. If the employee doesn't come with clearances in hand, then they're a provisionally hired employee, which means they can work how long without clearances?
For
90.
90
90
days.
days.
Yeah,
Okay.
see?
90 days. But they, what's the other caveat? There's something else.
Can't be left alone.
They must always work with a permanent employee, which is somebody who has all of their clearances on file. It doesn't mean they can walk a child down the hall, go to the restroom. It doesn't mean they can supervise children at nap time. If they're a provisionally hired employee, they must always be supervised by a permanent employee. And on the end of the 90th day, if their clearances, completed clearances are not back on file, what do you do with that person?
What?
If they're on suspension until all of those things come up.
They may not work in a childcare position, okay, so whatever you decide to do with it, but they may not continue to work with children.
Why, if
And
they're tightening the laws, why would you go from 30-day provision to a 90-day provision?
Because it was.
Because it
They
takes
were
them to
really
process
good
them
at
that long.
the child, actually, you can get a child abuse clearance and a Pennsylvania State Police clearance online.
Right.
Yeah, now,
They're pretty quick.
now it's easier and it comes back quicker, but before it was taking like forever.
The FBI clearance should still be back within a reasonable amount of time. The provisional hire 90 days is what the law stipulated for out-of-state employees. And again, I can't tell you why they decided to do that, but the General Assembly decided to make everyone a 90-day provisional hire. But we cite that many, many times because people are working past the provisional hire period. They're working unsupervised, and directors are not following the process to hire appropriately. And that's the biggie.
I'm trying to put you on the spot.
Okay.
So, I'm sitting here and I'm going, I didn't know that. How am I supposed to know that? Where should I find all that?
It's in the regulations.
It is, but you just said, where?
The regulation says that you have to follow the Child Protective Services law. Child Protective Services law is quite lengthy, so it's not spelled out in our regulations, but you need to do a little bit more research and look at the Child Protective Services law and requirements in that regulation.
I think I posted that, did I not? 3490, one of the sites, or maybe that's coming up, I can't remember. I posted that for, or maybe it's, yeah. In other words, when we talk about director's responsibility, even though it's not spelled out here, all that she went into about the provisional hire and disclosure statement and all that, you're supposed to know that. So let's talk about how they can figure out more about that, rather than listening to us talk. Besides going to 3490, is there some forms we can hand out, something? I'm just trying to think about this.
Is there a new disclosure form? Or
There
the same?
is,
Yeah.
there is, it's very, very new. It is on the Keep Kids Safe website. There's a disclosure statement for employment and there's a disclosure statement for volunteer. They're two different forms. So, yes, use the websites that are available to you. Keep Kids Safe has lots of information. I've been on that many times myself, doing some research, frequently asked questions.
Yeah, Keep
Trying
Kids
to
Safe.
figure out the law, so.
Who puts that out? Is it Better Keep?
OCYF.
Office of Children, Youth and Families that are responsible for the child abuse law in DHS. So it's Keep Kids Safe. A lot of this
.pa.gov. And if you go under our website, DHS, if you look on the left side, there's a link to it. It'll take you right there as well.
So, and part of, like I said, the director's responsibilities, which is we're getting back to, is this stuff is not all spelled out in the regs, so you've got to do some research. And so that, especially the provisionally hired, about not working with children and being properly supervised.
And making sure that you have the documentation on file, meaning a signed disclosure statement and verification that the individual has applied for the clearances.
Now, how would you pull all this stuff together? What would you do? You make a spreadsheet for your staff? How would you implement? I'm not asking you to answer this now, but think about it. How would you implement this, especially if you've got 40 or 50 staff or a large number of staff? How are you going to keep all this straight? What'd you say, Beth? And Lisa?
I took, the papers that we have to fill out when you guys come to inspect, I created that on my computer. So every year when the inspection comes, I put everybody in, and then I just use the year before, because it's old staff, so most of that information used to stay the same, but now it's gonna change, but you can go in there and you can just look at dates and stuff like that. It's a heck of a lot easier.
So you have it on a computer system.
I have it on a
Anybody else have
spreadsheet.
any other, Barb?
Becky just shared something with me for individual staff to keep track of everything they need every year, all their trainings, first aid. I kind of made my own, Becky, off yours, but it was very helpful and I passed them out at the staff meeting so that I'm not end of the year, why don't you have this? Why has this deadline passed? Makes them responsible to fill it in and then I could access it.
All right, so the key is here, you have the system, Barb, but you make the staff responsible for keeping their files up to date.
Hopefully, we'll see how it goes.
Oh, hopefully.
We're working on it.
You're working on it. Anybody else?
No, what I do with that is, I give the staff a copy, a blank one. Then I have a binder that also has one in, and then I keep one myself. The idea is that they have that one to keep for themselves. The one in the binder is the one they're required to fill out. I keep that, if they take a class, if they've updated a clearance, I keep all that in all their certificates, everything. They're another copy.
So you have to be fairly well organized.
And then I
keep all that stuff straight. 'Cause
then
that's
I
part
keep
of
a
your-
copy on everybody myself, so that
Yeah.
if I need it at a glance, I have it right there.
But the issue here with staff files, in terms of delegation responsibility, staff should be responsible for keeping their own up to date. I can't tell you how many times on the director credential online class, what I do, the folks are saying, and when I ask them to do a training plan, we scramble around every year, at the last minute, we don't have the training records. I don't know what my staff has, but that's the staff, you should know, and the staff should be keeping track of their own. Beth, did you want to make a comment? No? Anybody else have any suggestions on how you can stay on top of the fact that all this paperwork needs to be done? Tina?
Well, if you're looking at their trainings, as a director, you have like the administrative rights to log into the Big Ideas framework on the PA keys. So you can easily see the trainings that your staff have had and what categories they are falling under and where they're lacking. So, I don't know if everybody's doing that yet, but you have to sign up administratively to get that login to, and as long as your staff are logged underneath your
I
center.
thought they don't want us doing that anymore.
No,
That's what they're looking at,
Yeah,
now
that's
they
what
sent
you
out,
want you to do.
they want you to run their.
There's no more any PDRs.
You have to
Everything's
contact
online.
Right,
the
right.
CIU,
Yeah.
and you get an actual different type of login.
But
But
the
that
point of
doesn't
it
tell you
is,
what fire safety training is,
No, that's
emergency
not- that's
training.
only
Yeah.
for their training.
Yeah.
but
That's only
the
for-
point of the
that's
matter
only
is,
for SARS.
here's the newsflash. 6 hours is required. There's been discussions over the years, and have been, I remember back in 2008 or 10, we tried to move it up to 24, but that didn't even get it out of the department. But there are gonna be more requests from the feds, and probably as we go moving more into quality standards, to increase the training hours. So that behooves you as directors to make sure that you can stay on top of, hello, cell phone, look at that. She's addicted. But it behooves you to figure out a way to stay on top of that, whether it's going into their website, to their training records themselves. You've gotta have it, you've gotta know where the staff are, what their training requirements are. You do not want to be caught off guard, people not meeting their training requirements. So you can sign up for it, here everybody, as a director you can sign up for it. Okay, we're just looking at tools that you use to make sure that you don't get citations, I guess that's the issue.
And I think the form that you might be referring to is a staff data worksheet, and it's available on our website. You can download it, you can print it off. I think that's an excellent idea, as particularly as we move to unannounced inspections, because,
It just makes it so much
Y- y-
easier.
Right, exactly, you already have it filled out, it's gonna make the inspection go faster, because we're not gonna ask you to do that day if you already have something filled out. If not, you're gonna have to do that. And it helps you then go down through that and make sure that when you've hired that individual, you have everything you need. As you update clearances, health assessments, you continually update that as well. I think that's an excellent idea, and I would really encourage you to continue doing that. And again, it's gonna be readily available to the certification rep upon that inspection date.
Yeah.
Just hit print, they love it.
Yeah.
You got a point just for having it ready for them.
Yeah, that's
That one of the things.
Yeah.
And if it's in alphabetical order, they love it even more.
Yes. And even more if things are somewhat organized within the file.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
everything the
Put it
department needs,
according to that paper.
put that there. The other stuff, you know.
There's another point.
It's your personnel things. It doesn't need to be observed at the time of the inspection. Again, it'll make your life easier as the director, and it will help to speed the inspection process along.
Tiffany?
Do you think the state is gonna get, more digital as far as like employees that have been there for 5 or 10 years, where things that don't need to be checked annually, like do you think they'll get to a point where they're already in the system and they're only checking for updated stuff to make things like quicker?
Things can be easier.
I guess.
Like
Like diplomas, is that what you mean? Like
Yeah,
things
like
like
your
that
high
they
school
had, but
diploma, you
like
know,
they don't
that's-
change, right?
That don't change, just because, again, files that have been in there, mine's been in there for 10 years, except for training hours and clearances and things that need to be checked. Do you think they'll ever get to a point where stuff that's already been checked will already be
Generally, if it's an employee who's been there, we are only looking at anything that needs to be updated. We do have some providers that are going to electronic files. I mean, where they're keeping their files electronically, which we've accepted, again, as long as somebody's there that can make that readily available. As far as the department having access to that, at this point, the only thing we're looking at is the training. As you have access as the administrator to go on and look at your training for your staff, we're going to, at some point, authorize certification reps to be able to go in and look at the training, so perhaps that can be done before they get to your facility. So we're moving at a snail's pace, but we do have that in the works, that our certification staff will be able to access those records as well.
Okay, so the takeaway is come up with a system. It's gonna be probably electronic system, keep track of things, because that's where we're going. Okay, the next situation is that director determines that the staff are not clear on what appropriate discipline is because there have been complaints by parents of DHS, the department, that their children have been singled out and yelled at for not listening to staff. What are some of the steps the director should take to assure the staff follow chapter not 11, 113? Because that is part of it. So there's, I've heard that complaint too in my director credential class, that, I've got staff that just yell at the children, I don't know what to do with them. Again, we go back to caring for our children. Part of your role, remember when I put that in the I think it was this week's online session, about understanding your responsibility to explain the rationale behind a regulation. So what's your rationale explanation to staff who yell at kids? Charlie?
I think a lot of times the staff don't know that there's a better way to do it, that's actually a lot more effective. And I think in a case like that where you have someone who is inappropriately reprimanding children, whether a large group or an individual child, they have to be mentored. That's definitely a behavior I think that's better modeled than anything else that you can actually verbally tell them to do or not do.
So model or mentor? Anybody else? Staff that, why do you, because you think they don't know any better?
I think a lot of times I think that's what's going to really like make the difference at that moment in time where, you know, they don't realize that if you have, you know, rules that are established ahead of time, there's a whole system for, you know, preventing the yelling anyway. So, but when the yelling is occurring, it's like, you know, it's a lot more effective to just go over to the child and maybe get their attention and say, you know what, it's not really a good idea to do that right now, or, you know, they need to understand, and they need to be shown how that can work, as opposed to the yelling, stop that, or I said no running. It's more about what the culture of the center is as far as like positively guiding children.
So, let me, before I get to you, Tina, so I ask, so whose responsibility is that? Is, you see, is it, the director, you gonna run around and do all this, or how would you handle that? I mean, you said mentoring or redirecting, whose responsibility is it? Or how does the director assure that happens if it's a larger center?
Hopefully your lead
Mentor
staff.
program,
Pardon?
a mentor program,
What program?
a mentor program.
Oh, a mentor
for senior
program.
staff.
Find the staff that know how to do it correctly? Tina, did you?
A lot of times if there's, you know, like a lot of yelling going on, which it seems in this situation that there is, it usually falls back on like the environment of the classroom and things not being in place the way that they should be. So you're dealing with a whole different issue. There might not be as much yelling over running if the way the classroom is designed, you're not able to be running, or you know, maybe it's just the way that, you know, their schedule is outlined, maybe the children are hungry, or, you know, so you really have to look at the whole environment of the class to see what the behaviors are that are causing the teachers to kind of lose it and be yelling
Good
at the
point.
children.
Yeah, so,
What if
Kim?
perhaps the problem is not so much of the lack of knowing how to do it, but more of their frustrations of being the teachers in the classroom that have a problem between the staffs? I'm trying to say like more of it's the attitudes of the teacher. They're frustrated with a situation within the classroom and they're kind of taking it out in that manner as a release.
We just
You know.
had this discussion at our staff meeting 2 days ago, and we've decided that we're gonna have, not like a safe word, but if we do feel frustrated and we feel that we can't take anymore, that we either call the director or staff member that is readily available to let us just go and take a 5-minute break, breathe, and then come back to the situation.
so that the frustration, Kat?
And then there's people, I don't know if you guys have it, but we have one that are just naturally loud and they don't realize they're yelling and you have to keep telling them. So I think it's also important to let them know that it's not just a when STARS is here type thing, it's like the law.
Or when the
Like you cannot do that
Right.
because
Do you think they know that this regulation?
I don't think they know it's a regulation. I think they just think it's something we do for STAR, you know, that we try to make it a, you know, high quality environment. So that's one of our standards. I don't think they realize it's the law.
And
Okay,
she's
so
loud to
let's-
begin with,
Yeah.
so when she just even raises her voice, it sounds,
Yeah, it's like you, yeah.
she's.
So, what did we get back to earlier about making sure the staff understand that this is a regulation, not a standard, this is a must. But the frustration and the way the classroom's set up. So as your director, just think about this in terms of the situation you have to work on later about what kind of process would you put in place? Would you do bring an outside person in and say, hey, let's take a look at the classrooms and see if everything is set up right? Am I missing something? Why is, you know, the staff is yelling? Anything that what Charlie said about just redirecting, showing them how to redirect. I mean, you've got several tools available that you can use to help you figure out how to handle this staff. Because again, this is in the framework of the director. So one, to start off, is let's go over the law and not a standard, because I see that, and you probably have heard that too, where staff get confused, what's a Keystone Star standard versus what's a reg.
Yeah, yes.
That's another session coming up.
Yes. Yeah. The other thing I've noted during years of inspections are that staff sometimes have very unrealistic expectations of the children that they are working with. And they get very frustrated because their knowledge of age-appropriate activities they, two-year-olds aren't gonna line up and stay still and be quiet, and if you're waiting for them to do that before you leave the room, you're gonna be there a long time, staff person gets upset, and what I learned over the years, in addition to the room arrangement, which I think is really a key too, is that oftentimes staff don't have the appropriate knowledge of what to expect from the age group of the children they're working with, and if you in addition to everything you've already said, if you give them that knowledge, sometimes like, oh, okay, well then, yeah, it's all right if not everybody wants to sit for circle time today. So if one or two do, we'll do the book, and they can be doing something else. It's okay. Not 2-year-olds don't necessarily do everything in groups. And once it's like, oh, okay, then it's okay. And I think I've seen too where levels of frustration can decrease in those situations as well.
Anybody else comment on that?
You can't let this go on very long if you're getting complaints about your staff yelling and
Yeah.
singling children out.
Because the complaints go to the
You
department.
have to take that
and it will
very
be out.
seriously and take care of it right away.
The other thing I've suggested too is, because I've walked into those facilities and I've heard staff screaming until I walk in the room and then they're like, oh, okay, now sit down. And it's like, what I've said to directors is that you need to, staff need to understand that anybody could be walking in this room at any point of the day. Not only an inspector, but a parent. They don't want to hear their child being screamed at like that. It's like, you need staff, all right, I'm a staff in here, I need to keep that in the back of my mind all day long. It's like, anybody could walk in, might not necessarily see somebody standing at my door for the last 5 minutes while I'm screaming at the kid, go to sleep, be quiet. It's like, you gotta keep that in mind too, that anybody could walk in this room.
But I think didn't we cover this in our last course on the age-appropriate training under QRIS about the director's responsibility to talk the talk and walk the walk. So if the staff do not have enough training in age-appropriate behaviors, you gotta figure out how to, they may have gone to the training, it didn't sink in, or didn't wanna sink in, so how are you gonna reinforce that back at the ranch to make sure that they do understand that? That's another challenge. Okay, the next situation, we just talked about this one. The director of Star 4 facility learns that one of the staff left an 18-month child in the playground for nearly 5 minutes. The self-reports the incident to DHS, investigates, cites the center for a violation. What steps should the director take in the future here? We talked about a couple things. What could have caused this?
Counting.
Pardon?
Make sure we count and keep the rate.
Count?
Counting and continuously counting.
Okay, anything else?
The assigned children to staff. Just which staff member is responsible for which children within that classroom. So obviously someone wasn't paying attention to their list.
Do you do that because it's one of your policies, or do you do that because it's required by regulation?
Both.
Okay, it is required by, I just wanna make sure everybody knows that too. Not only here see director says, be physically present and know the names and the whereabouts of the children that you are assigned to be with.
Yeah, that's procedure. So, anything else besides this? If it's a Star 4 facility, you'd think this wouldn't have happened, but it did. Paula?
We use a card system, and each picture of the child is on the back end as we're lining up to come inside of the playground or leaving anywhere. 2 teachers have their designated children, and then they split the cards, and each child has to raise their hand and say, I'm here, before making any transition to make sure all children are within the group.
Right.
We-
Charlotte?
We have a program called Tadpoles, and on it is the class roster, and it's a picture of the children. And as children come in for the day, they're marked as attending. So there's like two columns, children that are present and children that are not present. So the staff, if a child gets picked up while they're on the playground, they just mark them out. And then you have the picture with the name, and then all of the children present. So it's just kind of like a visual reminder of who's supposed to be in the group as well. And it makes the supervisory assignments easier.
Okay, but let's just assume you've got all these systems in place, and it still happens. what would you do? You know, I have all these systems, I've got the cards, I've got them. Just didn't do it.
You need some consequences then.
Pardon?
You need some consequences then.
Consequences and policy. What would your consequence be, Kat?
Well, I'm mean, so I would be like, first time you get a warning, second time, go home.
Okay, anybody else?
I'm not as nice, I terminate them.
Do you?
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that you either funded or at a childcare center, if something happens, if that 18-month-old choked out on the playground for 5 minutes, I mean, your center is possibly going to be shut down.
It could, yeah, because
Could be
you
shut
could, that was the example I just gave earlier, you can terminate the staff, because we're gonna say, that's not good enough. You can say, I have all these processes here, the card system, the name, the tadpole, I got all that, and you fire the staff.
It's
and you
also the ongoing monitoring. It's showing up on the playground unannounced. It's making sure that you, as a director, are doing an ongoing monitoring
Observation.
and checklist and observation
Yeah.
of what's happening in the center.
So,
For outside time, I always have an extra staff. That is one time I do bring in an extra staff, is during outside playtime, because if somebody's always scraping a knee or something's always happening, and if you're constantly pulling away a teacher who can supervise that child or that group of children, and they're suddenly, you know, bandaging a knee or doing whatever, then they're not able to supervise. So I always pull in, like, that's the one time of the day that I make sure I have extra staff, is during our outside. I'm lucky to a degree, I have a small center, so usually our outside time is, you know, kind of all at the same time. Our preschool has one side, our infant toddlers have another side, so everybody's outside at a very similar time frame.
okay, let me get back to the two little conversation we had. Kat said she'd write them up, then she'd send them home. Beth said she'd fire the person. What would you want to have any discussion on that? I mean, this is a serious thing. This is talking directors, I mean, you gotta make split-second decisions and do some things and show the staff what, you know, I'm not saying either one of you are right or wrong or whatever, because it's how you handle, every situation's different. Well, how do you feel about that?
I think you need to debrief though. I think when you have a serious, and I think that's a serious incident, I mean, that's negligence. You have to debrief and find out what was happening that could actually occur. You have to talk to the staff and you have to know what was going on so that it doesn't happen again, and you can tighten your systems and maybe change some procedures.
But you may not fire?
I don't know, I think it depends on the incident. I mean, ultimately, I probably would as a gut reaction, just because it's such a serious thing, but I don't know that would be the right answer and fix it from happening again. I mean, it would certainly set an example for the rest of the staff, but when you have staff turnover, you know, what happened last year might not necessarily
right.
be present right now, so.
True, that's a good point. Tina?
Sometimes I think we're relying too much, like listening about, you know, like, oh, we have tadpoles and that counts for us. I mean, we could simply with this, you just go back to good old fashioned head counting. I mean, like literally they go out, you bring 7 out, and you know, you're bringing 7 back in unless somebody got picked up. I mean, it's, you know, I mean, it's not a policy, like, I mean, it is for us to head count, going out, going in, transitioning from, you know, one room to another, to gyms or whatever, that you have to keep counting. But I think sometimes we're relying too much on these other, you know, like I said, the tadpoles or the, you know, whatever kind of, the flip card chart, you know, like all of those kind of things. Sometimes you look at the back of the head and you see a little blonde ponytail and you think it might be somebody else. I think just, you know, sometimes going back old school to some of these things might be a better solution, you know, like to that type of situation anyway.
Anybody else can comment on this? I mean, this is probably the most serious incident you can have, and it really happens. So there's a whole range of things that are happening here in terms of what system you're using, what action you take against the staff, and what are you doing. What happened in the first place from you as a director when you're shocked to hear that this has happened? You're a star 4, how could this possibly happen? You know, just because you're a star 4, does that mean you haven't done all your due diligence as a director with observations and spot checks and going over things or working with staff? And what I said earlier about maybe the staff was having a bad day and just was distracted, so did your other staff come up and tell you, hey, she's off today or something? This is a very complex situation, and you have to think it through very carefully, because this would definitely probably mean your license would be taken. Or, unless you came up with a very good plan. It could be the department would start off saying we're gonna take it, then we'd come up with a plan to have to keep it. But that is gonna fall right back on the directors. I mean, those of you that even aren't directors now, you'll be in the center in that situation, it's gonna be it could happen. And what will, how are you gonna rally around the rest of your staff? How are you gonna rally around as a group to make sure that you watch your other staff person, that this doesn't happen again? Because it's not just the one staff person who let it happen. I mean, there's other staff there too. What's their role? Is it just the one person and she's the outcast and she's gone? With everybody else standing around and they're innocent? They didn't see it, they didn't spot check and help each other, so.
Unfortunately, we work in a profession that we work with human, and there's
Yeah.
always going to be human error.
Right.
And you could have the best policies and procedures and ongoing monitoring, and people have to
There, right. Okay, let's go to the last situation on the page. The director learns that the staff are continually late in the morning, leaving the center out of ratio in 2 rooms. Always late, staff's always late, always out of ratio. You're gonna get a complaint, DHS is gonna come in at 7 in the morning or 6 in the morning and you wanna talk about
Also, probably in addition to clearances, something that is cited quite often and found to be out of compliance. And we've had people who we've brought in to have this discussion when we have multiple incidents of staff-child ratio, because again, that really is a situation that puts children in jeopardy when you don't have enough staff to supervise their activities and what they're doing. And it's interesting to hear sometimes what the reason is why that staff person's not there when they're supposed to be there too. I mean, so I can talk about it a little bit more, but I would be interested first to hear what thoughts you might have.
Well, I think we all have policies regarding attendance and punctuality, but I think when those policies are continuously violated by someone, you give them a couple of chances to come to work on time so the ratios are maintained, and then you change their hours and find somebody that can be there on time, that is reliable and can help you maintain those regulations.
So, anybody else? They're not reliable? Do any of them have any good reasons?
They're all good reasons.
Okay, valid reasons? Is it continual? Is it once in a while? What are you experiencing?
It comes in waves, I think. I think sometimes you don't have any problems with it at all, and then sometimes it's like every other day it seems like somebody was late for work. And, you police each other and cover for each other, that you might move some children around and things like that. But it's definitely an issue that needs to be addressed if it's ongoing.
Okay. Anybody else? Any comments on that? So what do you end up doing when you hear that so-and-so didn't show up at 6 when they were supposed to? Fire them? Anybody else? Where are your loyalties, right? Anybody else? What are you doing in those situations? You running in and covering yourself? Just in case?
If they're not coming.
If they're not, yeah.
Those days you do that.
Okay.
Are you told that the room's out of ratio? Does anybody bring it to your attention? What do the staff do? What did they?
We take counts from the minute this.
But Becky, you said you take counts, but if it's early in the morning and you're not there yet?
I have someone assigned to take
Yeah.
counts.
And then she'll move kids around or she'll move staff around.
All right, anybody else?
We just had that same thing because all of our children just moved up into new classes and we weren't really sure of how the staffing patterns were gonna look when they all moved into their new rooms. So I had somebody there at 6:30 that was doing the head counts and making sure that, just seeing where the people needed to come in at different times of the day. So that's a big thing, I think, at certain times of the year, just knowing when those children are gonna be there.
Anybody else? What to do? Like you said, do you know? if they're out of ratio? You said yes, would you know, Barb? Chastity, you know, when the ratio rooms are out, even if
Either I'm there at 6:30 or, the person who takes charge is there, and she does head counts, and it's documented, and I see, what's happening. But at my center, we were just talking about this, I've been having to have an extra staff every morning, and I'm paying overtime in the afternoon, because, I have such an inconsistent pattern with families on their times of arrival. A lot of my families rely on the bus system in Wilkes-Barre, or, their walkers. And so one morning I might have 25 kids at 7:05, and then the next morning I might have 4. So I'm just I'm getting stuck, having staff for that many. I tried to take a hard line with families, and I tried the CCIS families, if you're using more than so many hours of care, I'm gonna charge you extra, and I lost 15 families. So I found out in a hurry that was not gonna work, because no other center beside me was gonna do that. So I just had to kind of suck it up and have extra staff in the morning and extra staff in the afternoon, and on days they're low, they wash toys and do their observations and catch up on ASQs. We've never been more organized, so I guess in a way it's good, but payroll is a nightmare right now.
Okay.
That
Anybody
that
else?
is a big problem,
Families coming in.
That's-
Yeah, nobody wants to follow their
Schedule.
scheduled hours
Everybody's
of
here.
care. It used to be a little easier when our CCIS people would say, these are your hours of care, this is all you can use. Now it's not as followed.
Yeah.
I mean, and so now people just, they don't follow it at all. And the answer to that is, well, you can always charge them more for the service. And in a perfect world you could, but when there's 10 other centers, within a mile of yours, there's gonna be a center that's not gonna do that and take in a ton of kids. And it doesn't matter if you're star 4 and they're not, it's, money's money in some areas.
So that is the dilemma, but I guess the issue is with the ratios is, you've gotta know,
Right.
and B, you've gotta have
A plan,
That's the thing.
regardless of what it means.
I think everyone's pretty quick to let you know when they're out of ratio though, because I know I hit 10 and I call you and I'm like, hey, if so and so comes in, I'm gonna go over, just letting you know now.
Well, and I think, again, that's where staff get very frustrated. I mean, the level just go, when they have too many children in their care, and then particularly if they internalize that nothing's being done. I mean, I heard that all the time. You keep telling the director, nothing's happening, I'm here. I actually had people call saying, I'm here right now, I've got 20 preschoolers and there's no help coming, you need to come out here now. That happens more often than I would wish.
Yeah.
They will actually call us from the classroom saying, we're out of ratio. I opened one door one time and the staff person said, welcome to the circus.
Oh,
wow. It was a mess.
Yeah.
So I have a question. This example said that the director self-reported the incident. What is the benefit of doing that?
You have to,
Oh, you have to?
that's,
Right here,
you have to.
it's there.
Because I feel like, close your ears. If that ever happened to me, I'd be like, we need to talk, but don't you tell anybody about this. Like, I feel like I wouldn't be the one to go to the phone and be like, hey, we screwed up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
are the consequences if you don't though? Like,
Oh.
why, like, what would
Excited.
push somebody to actually follow that regulation as the director?
Because you're gonna get found out anyway.
Right, typically
Okay.
we're gonna hear from
Parents.
the parents. The parent's gonna be on the phone calling us right away
Yeah.
when they find out their child was left on the playground.
Or another staff person.
Other staff.
But when I was on vacation, that woman called me and told me
Yeah,
that a
so
child
that,
got out
it,
of
you,
her
that's, you're helping yourself.
last year.
Yeah,
Somebody
it
else
doesn't
in the
mean the
bank.
consequence may be different, it might. I mean, the fact that you're being proactive, self-reporting it, but it's also required by regulation, so that you've met the regulation, but it is required by regulation that you report certain things that happen at the facility.
Right.
Okay.
But parents will be quick to call and,
So So you're
Also-
better off getting on that and doing that yourself.
Oh, yeah, and
before.
not only you have to, but there was an incident not too long ago where, the director self-reported that a child had an, quote, incident in the pool. And, you know, the ambulance came and it was okay, I mean, the child was okay, et cetera, et cetera. And he self-reported it. But then we found out several months later that the parents, because lawsuits are public or in the paper, that the parents sued. And they sued because the child was, almost died on the way to the hospital. Survived, was almost died. Now, the director self-reported it, but we didn't have any idea that it was that serious. And so I had to do an investigation and et cetera. And plus, if you're sued, what are you supposed to do? It's in here. There's, well,
I guess I gotta read this, huh?
I mean, if parents are gonna sue you, which can happen, you'll find out a lot more about this in your next class, the legal issues. You were supposed to report that I know it's in here.
It's, yeah, it's library. Oh, should I tell you, or do you wanna find it?
Anybody find it? Oh, this is a tough one to find. Yeah, I know, I found it, but
Okay,
I
all
never
right.
would have looked there.
Okay.
You're supposed to report if somebody's gonna sue you, or there's a claim against you.
They have to hang up, they have to be hanging up right now.
Operate, yeah. If there's a claim against your parents suing you, or there's a claim against you, what do you think it might be? That's, they have a course next time, legal issues and advocacy. Yes. Okay, going once, going twice, bingo, 18. Under liability insurance, the operator shall self-report to the Department of Liability Insurance claims brought against the operator or a facility person. And that can cover a lawsuit. Anybody's gonna take something against you, you're supposed to report it. Okay. Okay, the next, what I have here is a situation. That's the one I emailed you.
Okay, I have that.
Okay. I would like you to work into groups. Turn around, Julia, and folks behind you, you three maybe, and clean up the center. Now, I crossed something out the bottom. I was gonna use this as your reaction journal, but I changed my mind. So, you just have to figure out what you do in this situation. Clean up the act. You have one? Oh, I know. Okay? Okay. What do you have there? 3? Paula? Kim? You go? Did you get your car yet?
No.
No, what happened?
They'll
Come into your house.
They'll come back and jump me at 4 o'clock.
Oh, because you did your battery? It's dead?
They don't have
It's
the battery.
They don't have battery service here.
Oh. Oh, of all days to know you have a bad battery.
3 hours from now.
Well, there'll be people around, you just stand out there and,
It'll be fine.
okay.
I'll just cry.
Okay, you guys can turn around and work in groups, come up with a solution for this.